Mount Shasta precipitation and snow depth. Raven, where? Right. There you go. All right. Mr. Axelrod is ready to team up from.
We are. Okay, there's three of us. So, hello, Mount Shasta. So I'm Raven Stevens, a member of the Mount Shasta community, and with me are Dr. Dan Axelrod, Professor Emeritus in Physics at the University of Michigan, living here in Mount Shasta, and Frank Toriello, right down here, Mount Shasta area resident, and he's our data man on the project. I take it we'll be answering, Mayor, will we be answering questions at the end? Can we just run it without questions?
Let's go ahead and run.
Right, okay, great. Just checking. Frank, can you read that bottom line? We just wanted to, this image we got, I can't read it from here.
The image was taken.
It's not on.
No.
There we go.
Good now?
Yes.
The image was taken from the USDA's Shasta Watershed Analysis Report from May of 2012.
Yeah, so we researched that, and we just want to give it credit for that image tonight, because we thought it was a nice overview of Mount Shasta, and yes, North is on top. So, you'll excuse me for reading from notes tonight, but I don't do this very often, so I want to make sure I get everything covered. We began doing this research because so many community members, including city workers, city officials, county employees, came away from the March 24th Crystal Geyser presentation with the idea that there is 50 years worth of water in the pipeline and available for use. Most people questioned how that could be, so we began attempting to answer the question with the data we have available to us. Our motivation in doing the report and the presentation are, one, to shed some light on how input, which is precipitation and snow, affects output, which is water supply, but also how other users, such as industrial users, affect output. We want to show the city of Mount Shasta that Coal Creek Springs, their water source, is quickly vulnerable to drought. We want to refute the concept that because the water at one of the heads of Big Springs, Mount Shasta, is 50 years old, that there is a 50-year supply of water for use in our area. And regarding Crystal Geyser's planned operations, we are questioning the validity of some of the information and reports that the company has offered to assure us about the safety of proceedings. And lastly, we'd like to make recommendations for the scoping process for the Crystal Geyser EIR. All right, this pretty little slide. This is showing the basic concept of how our water is replenished here on Earth. It rains, it snows, sometimes it hails. Those are the inputs. Water trickles down from an aquifer or into the groundwater basin. In Mount Shasta, our water is a system known as a volcanic aquifer. We believe most of the water is flowing downhill into creeks, streams, and rivers, and the truth is, no one exactly knows how it all works. It's extremely complicated. The basic formula is water in, water out. If you take out more than you put in, you run a deficit. Now, we have a quote for you from Martin Brockman of CH2M Hill when he was presenting for Crystal Geyser at the March presentation. And he actually says there's 50 years of water in the pipeline.
There's the fact that the spring has 50 years, the water is greater than 50 years old, means there's 50 years of water in the pipeline that feeds that spring.
So the notion that 50-year-old water necessarily implies a 50-year supply is incorrect. And Dr. Axelrod is going to now show you why. You have another video? Oh yeah, right, sorry.
Water from springs in volcanic areas of northern California have been variously reported to be 20 to 80 years old, more than 50 years old or less than 2 years old, depending on location. But does age tell us anything about how long the supply will last in times of drought or overdraft? Clearly, if the water coming out is only 2 years old, since it fell from the sky, then if that water stops falling, there'll be nothing coming out after 2 years. But what about the opposite extreme? What if the water coming out is 50 years old? Does that mean there's a 50-year supply? Or, in the recent words of Crystal Geyser representative, does old aged water imply, quote, a substantial amount of buffer to short-term drought, unquote? The answer is no. Even old water sources can be quickly sensitive to drought or overdrafting. And this video will show how. Mount Shasta is a big pile of andesite rock, all cracked and fractured with gaps and channels of various sizes that can hold water. It's somewhat like a household sponge, which is made of fibrous material with gaps and channels that can also hold water. Imagine that this sponge hanging there in the video is a pretend Mount Shasta. The pretend Mount Shasta is being preloaded with old water colored blue with food coloring so you can see it's old water. Pretend that this water has been in there for 50 years. Well, it may seem like that when you see it in the audience. But why does it stay in the sponge? Why doesn't gravity pull it out? Because the fibrous material of the sponge and also the andesite material in Mount Shasta traps and holds water molecules. What you see here is the pretend Mount Shasta being loaded to saturation with old water for the start of the demonstration. Now, some new colorless water is poured on top as if it were a winter's worth of new precipitation on the upper regions of Mount Shasta. One season's worth of precipitation on the top immediately leads to water pouring out of the bottom. The bottom represents a spring or a well. But look, the water pouring out of the bottom is the old blue water, not the new colorless water that was poured at the top. The old blue water, precipitation stops at the top, it soon stops at the bottom. The outflow of old water at the bottom is quickly sensitive to whether there was new water input at the top. The same goes for Mount Shasta. Water coming out of springs and wells may be old, but it can be responsive to just how much precipitation fell during just the last year at the top. So just because the age of water in the spring is, say, 50 years old, this tells us nothing about how soon it will be cut off during a drought. Every time a year's worth of new water is added to the top, it adds pressure, which overcomes the attraction of the water to the andesite rock sponge, and more old water pours out of the bottom. What is shown here is going seasonal variations in springs and wells, even if they all produce old water. It also explains how the output can respond quickly to above or below normal whole years of precipitation, even in the immediate next year. There may be no buffer. But what about industrial overdrafting from a well? This is comparable to squeezing the sponge. A lot of old, maybe 50-year-old water comes out quickly. But now, adding new water at the top does not lead to new outflow, not until the supply is replenished, and that could take 50 years. It could be even worse. If the internal cells in the sponge or a mountain collapse from overdrafting, the supply may never hold water again.
We have found that the local water supply is vulnerable to drought. If the groundwater level drops when there's a drought, it's likely that it would also drop when big users draw out too much water. We did a correlation study because we wanted to see what happens to the flow rate at Cold Creek Springs when we have above normal or below normal precipitation. This should help Mount Shasta City plan for the effects of drought and to know when to restrict water use and by how much. Also, so we can start to understand how drought might affect the wider area of Mount Shasta. For Mount Shasta City, we gathered the Coal Creek spring flow data from 1988 to the present, and the rain snow data from the California Data Exchange Center. And this is what we based the cross-correlation study on.
Hi there, I'm Toriello, and I'm the data wrangler on Shasta. Once the available data gets organized, it can be analyzed in graphs. The graphing lets us visualize the data, and we can help in understanding the results of the mathematical analysis. And I'm going to show you a portion of the data spanning from 1988 to 1990. This slide here shows a chart of monthly snowpack levels in blue from a sensor of 700 feet on Mount Shasta. We got this data from the California Data Exchange Center. The data for snowpack is only reported for 4 months. 1998 was a year of record precipitation, and the zero reading in the middle of that year, meaning because the sensor was very too deeply by snow. Now I have overlaid the monthly precipitation amounts in green for Mount Shasta City over the blue snowpack chart. This data is also from the CPDC, and you can easily see the seasonality that we experience here. Obviously, the rain and snow in winter and the dry periods of summer. You can also see the different amounts from winter to winter. Finally, the data that we received from the city for Coal Creek Springs average monthly flow rates are in red and have been overlaid on the plot. And this is the water source for Mount Shasta City. Although I wish it had been coming from else. Here's a place where you can easily see how over the years the Coal Creek Springs flow rate increases with precipitation and decreases. You can also see the delay in the spring's response to the rain and snowfall. And it's actually all quite complicated, and not always as easy to see as I just showed you here.